They don't have too much stress. They eat when they're hungry. They sleep when they're tired, and they move constantly. I listen to a lot of podcasts myself, and there's always that opening ramble between the two podcast people that you go sometimes go, "Oh, get to the good stuff." What I can tell you right now is that, life and living your life is the whole reason you have a business. You probably waste a lot more. The kid just fills the time you were wasting, and you're going to want to get things out of your head and into your team's heads.
Very, very interesting. The smart contracts and whatnot, I hadn't thought of that, but that's exactly where it only makes sense to go that direction based on the tech we have now.
Like, how do you get ChatGPT to send money to ChatGPT? There has to be an external digital thing. If they take $2 million to the market right now.
All right, we are live, and welcome back to another episode of Marketing Without Rules, the show where we work to inspire business owners by bringing on guests who exemplify the hunter mindset. They make moves, they color outside the lines, and they have found creative ways to channel the attention of their community into currency. This show is sponsored by Blue Crocus Solutions, a web design and SEO agency focused on helping home service companies. I am your host, Lewis Vandervalk, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with Adam Thand. Adam is a seasoned entrepreneur and consultant with a deep-rooted passion for the roofing industry. He started as an operator in a roofing company, and leveraged his expertise in technology, sales, and advertising to build a thriving consulting career. He's the founder of Roofing Business Partner, where he helps roofing companies streamline operations, implement CRM systems, and engineer better experiences for both work and life. Adam's mission is simple: make the roofing industry more rewarding by blending strategy, systems, processes, and a relentless focus on growth. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Lewis. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to see what we have to chat about.
This is going to be fun. I think we were just talking off air quickly before we started, and I've been following you, I think, pretty much since the beginning of my marketing journey. So 2019, 2020, I believe, is when we connected. And it's you've always been a wealth of knowledge. You've always had an interesting take on things and a very thoughtful, logical take on things, whether it's, politics or, that was a recent one that I enjoyed there, but just marketing in general and a very data-driven approach to things. And I was like, as I was looking at guests on here, you were one of the first ones on my list, and we reached out and connected. But what is it about you that's kind of driven you toward that data side of things? We'll get into a few different aspects of that, but you've had an entrepreneurial roller coaster. Has the data always been a thing for you?
No, the data was not always a thing for me, and I led a lot on like a lack of instinct that I thought was instinct at first, gut feeling, and I think that is a part that you can never ignore. But your ability to recognize patterns is what you can define instinct as. And through the process of collecting failures and pain, it's the most information rich data stream. And then you start to ask questions to say, why did that happen? How does that not happen again? I don't want to feel that again. And you start to appreciate that you can listen to something when it whispers, so you don't have to hear it scream. That could be your body, that could be, your car, that could be your business. And so I learned to pay attention to the data because that's what tells you, like, you can hear a whisper, in the data.
Yeah, that's true, isn't it? So taking data to the extreme, you guys are recent parents and you've been tracking that. Talk a little bit about that side of things. Like, what are the things that you're tracking? Because I've looked back and I'm like, man, I wish I knew exactly how many diapers we've changed and that sort of stuff. And I feel like you actually do know that answer to that question.
The app crashed.
No.
Yeah, the app crashed. Well, it didn't crash. It just became so slow that it became impossible to use. So for about the first 14 months, we had every single diaper change, every single nap, everything that was there was done. And it was awesome to be able to see that. My wife has it on her phone still. I haven't logged in because then it just keeps giving me notifications for to go track stuff. But we exported it all to a CSV. It's somewhere. But we made it so that we just really got to understand his sleep cycle, his eating cycle, how much he was eating. And then we relate that back to like public data about how baby progresses. And it allowed us to really focus on his development. And we had her brother full-time living with us to essentially take care of Alice while she was working until she stopped working in February. But his development is far, far ahead. And it really came down to just the fact that for a baby, they're living in this perfect little bubble of like, they don't have too much stress. They eat when they're hungry. they sleep when they're tired, and they move constantly. And if you can just optimize for those 4 things, right? Just minimize the stressful environment, optimize that their sleep so they get to sleep when they're tired, make sure that they get to eat when they're hungry, and make sure that and just don't restrain their movement, and that had to deal with like having a full-time childcare kind of environment where you just stick them in a box all the time. He succeeded, wildly, and he's got a lot of life left to live, and we're still trying to create that kind of environment. That's why she dropped out of working. I shouldn't say drop out. That sounds like she's like a high school dropout, but she just basically got to a point where she realized that Atlas is important to her. This business is important to her, but Atlas is more important. And so
one of them is going to be around longer potentially than the other.
Yeah. And only one of them is going to, eventually, put us in an old folks home. So we want to make sure we look after them.
So it's an investment retirement plan, right?
Yeah.
I like it. I love it. I just, we've got 4 and our oldest is just turning 6 in June. And I was like, man, if I had tracked that would have been so cool. Probably pretty daunting to look back at the budget that went directly just to those things too. But
yeah, it's crazy. It's wild to think. And you're so blessed to have 4. Honestly, if there's a young guy on the pod and he is sitting there thinking that having a kid would completely torch his life. It's like, no, it'll torch your sleep. And it's by far the greatest blessing is having a kid. And I wish I had 5 when I was 20. The most interesting about having kids when your first kid when you're 40 is that what I do know is that my patience and my regulated, let's call it regulated, not less testosterone, but has made it so that I'm way more durable against things. So while I might be a better father maybe than I might have been when I was younger, the kid is no better or worse. It's the equal amount of blessing, and it's as most a kid be. So I would encourage anybody to have kids, more of them and younger than I did.
I heard an interesting thing. I forget who it was. And he was like, the dichotomy is we want to live our lives while, we've got all this energy to go travel and stuff. And I'm not bashing anybody who does this. It was just an interesting thought process that he was laying out. And then by the time we are, wishing for company, which is, 40s, 50s and whatnot, we realize we don't have any kids because we've gone and spent all our younger years, doing that. And it was just interesting. Ours just kind of happened that way. It wasn't all, we knew we wanted to have 4. But it wasn't like, oh, we're going to start right now and make it happen. But it was, it's such a blessing now. It's been a chaotic 5 years of starting a business and getting it from the ground up and, getting kids from the ground up too. So, would I do it again on purpose? No, probably not. But that's the beauty of just diving in and making life happen.
I agree. And for those who are listening, I listen to a lot of podcasts myself, and there's always that opening ramble between the 2 podcast people that you sometimes go, get to the good stuff. What I can tell you right now is that, life and living your life is the whole reason you have a business. And so the point of this conversation being kind of important at the beginning of a podcast about marketing is that, as people who might be further ahead of you in your journey, if you're listening to this, understanding that having a family doesn't come at the expense of your business. It comes at the expense of some time, but if you really look at how you're spending your time, you probably waste a lot more. The kid just fills the time you were wasting. And I lived the dual income, no kid dink life for a long time. And a lot of what I chose to spend my time on, that when I wasn't working on my business was mostly not about I don't remember any of it, but I remember a lot of moments from raising a kid.
It sharpens your focus. Alyssa and I look at each other all the time and we're like, we thought we were busy before. Like, that's hilarious. Because now it's like, we just don't have time to breathe because we're so focused on, the survival of the kids. But yeah, it's, life is interesting. I want to segue into that because that is something that you put a lot of focus on, is the balance between business and life. Why do you put such focus on it? It's obvious you do, based on, you left me some notes before we jumped on and just in this conversation now. But why do you put so much focus on that?
On work-life balance?
Yeah. And having a business to support your life, not the other way around.
I would actually say that's somewhat counter to the reality, in that I don't believe there's such thing as work-life balance, and that you're going to wake up, meditate for an hour, take your vitamins, eat a healthy, balanced meal, go to work, spend exactly 6 hours, get off work, learn to play the guitar, then go spend 2 hours of regimented family time with no phone, and then read the Bible, and then, spend an hour with your wife connecting intimately, and then go to sleep at the same time every night. I think that is such an impossible level of balance to achieve. What I try and focus on is life balance on the long term, and that you're going to have seasons of extreme imbalance that will create a a higher level of balance. So if you're trying to visualize it, some people spend so much time trying to basically spin the plates on their hands. But if you can spend extreme focus, you can build a stick and get that plate spinning on a stick. Then you can get the other stick and you can get that plate spinning on a stick. And with these extreme shifts in focus and attention, you can gradually make the sticks better. So in the grand scheme of life, it might look like balanced, but in the zoomed in micro view, it will actually look like incredible imbalance. But I think that repetition is boring. And so if variety is the spice of life, then you will only appreciate something if you've been away from it for a while. So I believe that a business does exist to serve the courageous founder that started it and took all the risk. But I also believe that a business exists to be a vehicle for the people who work for it to be able to accomplish their personal and professional and financial goals at a rate that excites them. So in a zoomed out view, it's balance, right? In that I didn't have kids until I was 40, but I got to have a wealth of experience prior to that. Now, my life, I spend a little more time with my kid than some other people might, but I'm sure there's people who spend way more time with their kids than I do. But I think that a business is what gives you the freedom to choose.
That's awesome. I like how you quantified and clarified our preamble here. I'm going to get into a little bit of rapid fire and then we'll head more into the marketing side of things. Describe a recent failure, mistake, etc. in, a couple sentences and then fix that. How you fixed it in a couple sentences.
Ooh, recent failure. I would say that we had a failure in how we were pricing our product and how we were selling our product. We sell this $50,000 CRM with this $2,500 a month consulting package on the back end of it. And that 50 could be 35 and it could be 75. But what we realized is that our customers perceive it as a $50,000 CRM and they don't see it as systems, operating frameworks and processes, training, accountability, change management, and then support after the fact. And so customers would have would attach this high price tag to a CRM, which meant the sales cycle was really long because then they're trying to see everything they need to see before they spend 50 grand on their CRM build when previously they'd spent maybe 1,500. And then they would devalue the consulting on the back end of it, which is where all the accountability, training, support, continual development, access to, fractional access to a couple $1 million in payroll, they would devalue that. How we fixed it was we did a lot of looking at the data and essentially the financial expense of rolling out the project. And we discovered that we could instead roll into a $10,000 a month partnership on a 1-year contract, which increases our LTV about 30K, right? Or so about 30%, it became more financially affordable for the customer. And it doesn't attach a disproportionate amount of value to the CRM versus the consulting and the fractionalized access to my team. And all those things are better.
That's huge. What is one book that every home service contractor should read? One tool that you can't live without and one motto that you continually drill into your team?
I'll have to ask you on the second one again, but
yeah, you can hit them in any order. I'll remind you there.
Yeah. So the book that every home service contractor should read is, and again, it's like I have to consider the audience, but I would say that at the entry level, it would probably be the E-Myth, just because it really hammers in on the idea of systems and processes, which is kind of like a lot of like my initial claim to fame, if you will. At the mid-level, right, which is where really about like replicating human DNA. I look at businesses like breakpoints or income bands. So it's like 0 to 3, 3 to 8, 8 to 15, 15 to 25. Like you break them into bands. So it's kind of a different recommendation for each one. So it's hard to pick the best book because like one of my favorite books is by Andy Grove and it's called High Output Management, but it's a super thick read and you probably shouldn't read it until you're at like 30 million. But it's probably my favorite book to like recommend that people probably haven't heard of. But I would say, if you're listening to this podcast, if you're in like 0 to 3, it's probably E-Myth. If you're from 3 to 8, it's 5 levels of leadership. If you're from 8 to 15, then the answer changes depending on the problem. So I would say like the E-Myth and like, you could say like Traction, right? Would be another one. Right. So it's tough to pick just one, I would say. Then your next question was favorite tool?
Favorite SaaS tool, yeah. Tool or SaaS tool, yeah.
Favorite SaaS tool. I mean, it would be so cliche for me to say HubSpot. I would say that the one that's had probably the biggest impact, and it's a simple one, is Slack. And for reasons that some might recognize, but it's like digital well-being. If you're a founder, right, or a CEO or a leader or whatever you want to call yourself, you're going to think about your business at 1 a.m, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 11 o'clock at night, Saturdays, weekends. And you're going to want to get things out of your head and into your team's heads. And you don't want to lose that, right? Like it's like those discretionary shower moments. The number of times I've wished I had a whiteboard or at least an expo marker in the shower so I could find a dry spot on the glass where I could write something down that I could remember later is countless. And so when you use Slack and you teach your team to properly use it, what it allows for is a sense of digital well-being in your company, which allows you to not burn out your people, because then you can create channels of communication where you can dump at any time, but it requires that you teach your team on how to set Slack up so they don't get it. So it's a better tool for communicating with your teams than email, right? Which you got to get out of email. And it allows for digital well-being for both sides of the leadership structure, in that you as a leader in the company can tell people things whenever you want, and they as people who need to be able to disconnect from work to be their best selves can pause that and come back to it. So get out of texting, get out of group texting, get out of email, and get into Slack and invest in it beyond just like making some channels, and like actually invest in using Slack as a tool. It can be an incredible way to build culture and create digital well-being.
Very interesting. On your note about the showers are where all my creative ideas come. I actually got those waterproof field notes books and a waterproof pen, and I would just take it to the shower with me.
See?
Best decision.
I'm going to have to hang one of those up in the shower now. Waterproof field notes book? It's like a military.
Yeah, you can just go and grab them on Amazon in different sizes. You can get like the little flip ones, or you can get like a little book option, 5x8, something like that. Yeah, they're good.
Definitely purchasing that.
Love it. I'm going to be needing to shoot you some questions on how to set Slack up better, because we use it, but not that well. Yeah. And then the fun. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, third question.
Yeah, third question is, what is something you tell your team every week?
It's probably the statement I said earlier, which is that as a leader in RBP, it is our job to make sure that RBP is a place where people can accomplish their personal, professional, and financial goals at a rate that excites them, because it's the only reason that they would stay. That I say on such a repeatable basis. I would say the other thing is that I would say that hard, boring work is our advantage. It's our fifth core value. And it really just speaks to the fact that like what people come to RBP for is for that optional, discretionary little bit of extra effort that turns something from a deliverable into a solution. And that is something that I say a fair bit. I'm sure my team would probably have more, because they're probably like, I feel like I don't hear me talking, but I know that I say those two a lot.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, that comes through in everything you do, not just deliverables, but solutions. You've been cranking out solutions and trainings and stuff like that. Was that always something, or did you just have to really dig in and be like, hey, this is what we're going to do, and figure out how to do that?
The whole like webinar thing that we do, doing these 2 webinars a day, was really, really hard to get off the ground. And it really was just sourced in the fact that when I knew the baby was coming, I had about 6 months of runway, right? That I knew was happening. And at that time, the business was very different. It was like, if you read Traction or Good to Great, it'll talk about the genius with 1,000 helpers problem, right? And it really was that. It was Adam Sand's show. Adam would go and fly out to these roofing companies, and I would deploy these CRMs and train the whole company, and then, support them afterwards. And I had some people helping, and we were building a team, but it was still very much the Adam Sand show, and everybody was there to kind of help me execute. And when the baby coming, I wanted to spend time with my kid. I didn't want to be gone all the time. My wife basically said she wouldn't be my wife anymore if I did do that still. So she was like, I do not want to like raise this kid by myself with you being gone for months at a time. But the hard part was that those are $200,000 contracts that I was selling. So they were good money and good margins. So then when I looked at it and said, if I want to do this remotely, how would I do it? And I went through this long thought process, and I don't have to get into it unless you want to, but part of that thought process was like, well, I can't leave the owner to be the bottleneck for training. And for like the offer that we came out with was go from 3 million to 8 million in a year, guaranteed, or your money back. So if I'm going to go and have a newborn child and I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to give you a guarantee as a roofing business that you're going to go from 3 million to an $8 million run rate in 12 months, or you're going to get your money back entirely, it's a huge risk. And I saw everything about the solution had to kind of reverse the risk. And I just thought, well, there's 100 things that an $8 million CEO knows that a $3 million roofing CEO does not know. How would I train them that? And I just thought like, I would just need to make them get the 100 hours of education in there. I thought, well, that means I'm going to have to do 100 slide presentations, which means I'm going to have to do 100 slide design briefs. And then my designers are going to have to be able to keep up at that pace. And so, yeah, we designed 100 webinars, we designed 100 webinar slides, and then we educate on that twice a day. And then even then it was like, well, that wasn't enough. So then we had to connect the dots So that became 3 hours of Q&A every week. And then that translated into, well, then there's other things that my team knows more about than I do. So that was like, okay, well, now we need to create Marketing Monday. And then it was like, oh, well, then there's like tool specific training. So then it was like, okay, we need to have someone come in to train just like tool specific, how to use Company Cam, how to use Arrive, how to use Sumo Quote. And then it became like role specific training. And so then that's when the customer success team starts creating things for inside sales, outside sales, production managers. And so it just became this like massive educational platform for helping roofing businesses. And we're probably going to get to about 20 webinars a week here in Q2 of 2025.
It's insane. So yeah, your graphic stuff is amazing. I've always been impressed at the output of what you guys are doing. How did you do that? Like, how did you get 100 webinars in 6 months? I know you just broke it down, but like logistically speaking, like that's insane.
Yeah.
Was that just all you did?
Well, no, it was probably several hours a day, but it would be essentially the design process and the communication process was like, because your graphic designer doesn't know what you know, right? Or else she'd be doing what I'm doing. So what it would turn into is like, originally I tried like doing a Google Doc, right? And designing that, and that really didn't work. So I had to put my big boy pants on and learn Canva a little bit. And so then what I would do is I would try and go through the slides, and I would take my Google Doc and I would break it out into paragraphs in the Canva section for speaker notes. And then I would try and like make a point on each slide. A big help was watching I don't think it was a TED talk, but it was a talk called Death by PowerPoint. And it taught me like really good things about how to just convey a message through a slide deck, because a lot of people, commit, murder by PowerPoint, so to speak.
Yeah.
But so then knowing that, then I could go in and make ugly slides. And so essentially we had these webinars that had the starting slide was like a blue slide with white words and it would just say not approved by the creative department. And then Shannon, our lead designer, basically we had this process of RBP-ifying it. And so my thing was just make ugly slides. Like we're talking ugly slides.
Just get thoughts on paper.
Right. And it was just like, okay, so then I would put them together. So like if I had 5 like one of the death by PowerPoint thing is like, if you have a slide deck and you have 5 bullet points on there, don't put your 5 bullet points on there. You have 5 individual slides where one bullet point comes in. And then the second one, first bullet point is like really faded, so you can barely read it. And then the second one is the bullet point. And then the third and the fourth, and then all the text doesn't have to be on the screen. You want the focus on the speaker. And so you have to keep the distraction of the slides away while still using it as an anchor point in the conversation. So you have to use it as design is communication, not decoration in a slide. And so knowing that she understood the philosophy of that, the death by PowerPoint, then I could put 5 points on a slide, and then she knew she had to expand that into 5 slides with the background and the fading and like that. And so then we got this really good loop of basically webinar slide creation. And then I would live on the webinar, and this is why you have to have a shitload of experience. Pardon my language, if you can't swear on this, you can bleep.
No, you're good. For home service contractors, Adam.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So you have to really know your shit then, right? Because like I would build most of my freebies live in the webinar. Like I would have like, oh, this is how you calculate your inside sales commission. And I would build it on the first one. I would build it live on the webinar and talk through it. But then next time that link would just be in the slide presentation. So then the next time that webinar came through, I could just work with it. And so the webinars got better over time. And then, for the marketers in the room that want to find a way to, well, I guess you're not marketers. What I did was I eventually found a way to kind of monetize it, because there's a lot of tools that I recommend. So I was able to put little referral links in there. And I think I made like $2,000 in the last 15 months off of it, but it made me feel a little bit better. You know what I mean?
Hey, that's so diapers for Atlas there.
Yeah, basically it's like diaper money.
Yeah, I like it. That's cool, because that's interesting, because I've been trying to think, I haven't put as much thought into it as you, and I haven't had the looming deadline, but I think I've kind of started to set a deadline for myself around some of that for my team, actually training my team, because it is the genius. Well, genius is a relative term, but it's the Lewis show with a bunch of helpers, and I'm working to empower the team to get there. Very interesting. Let's jump to SEO. That's a topic that we do a fair bit in. I'm really curious to hear your take on it. I've picked up some of it, but you talk about SEO not being enough anymore, but you also talk about like interactive blogs and stuff like that. Let's dive into that a bit.
Yeah, like I think that so Google search traffic went nothing but up for the last 20 years straight, and for the first year it's down, right? And like when you have something goes up for 20 years straight, and like Google gets asked 8 questions a second, and 7 of those 8 questions it's never been asked before, like what preacher, what university professor, what scholar, is trusted with 7 billion questions a day, and and 6 of those 7 have never been asked before, kind of ratio of like knowledge. Like that's like people don't ask their gods this many questions,
Yeah.
and and so for that to be going nothing but up, and then all of a sudden it goes down, like not levels off, not decreases, goes down, that is a huge signal in the change of the way that people consume and curate information in their decision-making processes. And that's really what SEO is that Google's main deliverable was that for free, you would ask it a question and you would trust the answer, such that if you want to hide a body, you hide it on the 3rd page of Google. It's probably one of the cliche SEO guy terms, right? And so if Google's in the business of having the answer on the 1st page and you want to be the recommended answer to a problem that you sell the solution to in exchange for money, therefore SEO was the most important thing. If that goes down for any reason, you have to recognize that of all the things, with all the money that Google makes and all the opportunity that exists in the answer of all humans questions market, which is gajillions of dollars, right? Yeah. In this gajillion dollar market, nobody has managed to do anything other than gobble a cute couple points of market share here and there. Like everybody, Bing takes another run, or Apple's Siri gets a little bit with like Safari, and and then everything, all roads just end up leading back to Google. So what makes that change? Well, we all know the answer now. It's AI, right? Perplexity and deep research with ChatGPT, and everybody's got these deep research things. And then I started looking at, well, what are roofing what happens when you try and solve a homeowner's problem of finding a roofing contractor using these tools that exist today? Because I don't search for that. So it wasn't something, but I recognized in my own behavior that I stopped searching Google for everything. If it wasn't like a local restaurant, you know what I mean? And even then, like when we were moving to Kelowna, before I moved here, I used Perplexity and ChatGPT to plan the move, to find all my wife's like Pilates studio, where her nails are going to go done, what gymnastics studio Atlas is going to, where swimming lessons will be, who the cleaning company would be to come clean the house. And then I gave that to my EA as a summary, and then she scheduled it all. Like we never really touched Google for that. So I recognized my own behavior changed, and I thought, well, let me just impersonate a homeowner and see what would happen. And I started looking at like, what does AI gives you all the citations? And I'm like, why? Like, what citations is AI giving? And I thought, what compels a person to leave that tool and go to the actual website? And the only thing that seems to compel me is that when the response from AI alludes to something being interactive or helpful on the site. So I'll give you an example of one that like I did for roofers. I have a lot of financial data on roofing, right? Like I just collected a lot. The way we build the CRMs allows me to compare data sets across $1 billion in roofing revenue. So I can kind of like collect and discern meaningful insights that I could then share with my customers and the greater roofing industry. And I'm willing to share because I think that I'm a very open source minded person. So I write this big blog about, the bad, okay, healthy, exceptional range of, like 30 KPIs. Okay. Very valuable blog post. Probably if deep research searched it, it would probably cite my blog post several times if a roofer was asking what KPIs should I use. And that was the intention of the blog post. But then recognize that it's just copying my answers into the output from chat. It's not like, sure, it might cite me. I might get like the technical citation, but it doesn't bring anybody to be my customer. And so then what I did was I used AI to create a KPI comparison tool where you could essentially, at the top of the blog, it says, enter in your numbers, and then it gives you whether you're in the bad, okay, healthy, exceptional range. It aggregates that into a score, and then it basically prompts OpenAI against like my data, and then gives them a recommendation of action steps to take. So it takes a blog from like, this is a data dump or an instruction, it's declarative or procedural knowledge, and turns it into a tool that you can use to make it personal. And I think that in the home services space, things that we had previously disregarded as gimmicky might actually be the thing that works. So think of like the roof visualization tools, where you can visualize what your roof would look like. Those visualization tools might cause the pull of interactivity to come out. Now, I still think that is at best a stopgap to gather market share, because I really do think that soon mom is just going to say, Atlas has 3 friends coming over. Billy's allergic to peanuts and Marty is got a gluten allergy and his new friend is from Brazil and I want food on the table at 7:00 and I want to be Brazilian. So it makes the new friend feel at home. And like, you're not going to mention Pampas or Pizza Hut. It's just going to show up. You know what I mean? And that that middle ground of decision making, you have to optimize for, because it's going to be, oh, I have a leak. And it's going to say, well, based on the budget chat that we had in December, when you said that this was the year you're going to get your shit together financially, and I helped you buy the house that you live in, and we made a decision on the neighborhood because you said you wanted your kids to have a sense of home growing up. Your kids are 4 and 7. You have a 20-year mortgage. When we did your financial budget, we said that you were capable of putting $500 away for home maintenance, but you only put $2,000 away for incidentals. So I found this company, Mellow Roofing, which is in your neighborhood in Syracuse, New York. They have low interest financing based on the satellite measurements of your roof and their online pricing calculator. You could get a metal roof for $180 monthly for the next 10 years, which is half the length of your mortgage. If you'd like to schedule that, I used Model Context Protocol to access their calendar, and they could get you installed on the 16th. If you'd like, I can use your Ethereum to create it, to assign their smart contract, pay the bill, and then you'll get an NFT for the warranty that you could transfer for nothing. But then that warranty is a smart contract with the roofing company and the manufacturer. Like, that's what's going to happen. And like, this thing is coming for you like Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th. Like, you can knock it down, you can trip it. Definitely don't run upstairs, but like, it's not gonna, you can't put this technology back in the bottle. I mean, Japanese kids are already marrying AI girlfriends. Like,
I saw that.
Yeah, it's not, you're not putting this technology back in the bottle. The only thing that is like nuclear warfare that wipes out the computers. And that's the worst of the two options. So, I mean, I think that on the long time horizon, SEO as we define it today is dead. On the medium time horizon, you are optimizing your SEO is more like AIO, in that you're trying to make it so that agentic workflows would pick you. And in the short term, you're trying to write blogs that are cited so that for homeowners that still want to click and go to your website, that you just show up in AI powered search. So show up in AI powered search, become the middle ground decision of agentic workflow, then hope to God you get bought by one of the private equity firms that creates the NFT smart contract and CP like arrangement, because the concentration of wealth always goes to, I don't know how you define it, but I heard it explained this way. Through humankind, your ability to support the village has always been the thing that created wealth concentration. So if you are a hunter-gatherer society, a better hunter could feed 2 families and they would maybe get 2 mates. You know what I mean? And that would be your wealth, is that we had 2 wives. You know? And then when agriculture comes out, you can now feed a village for a season. So then land ownership creates landlords. Now concentration of wealth is in the ability to automate food creation where the soil does the work, right? So the soil is the automation. Then in the industrial age, right, your ability to create factories, transportation, moving materials from one place to another with trains and pipelines, and the manufacturing of steel, those became the people who had disproportionate concentrations of wealth, was their ability to do that. Then in the 2000s, it's like information technologists, right? The Googles, the Facebooks, the Netflixes, the Amazons, those become the platforms that create a concentration of wealth. And the scary, well, I wouldn't say scary, but the thing that you have to realize is like Google, Amazon Web Services, and Microsoft essentially own the internet web 3.0 structure, right? Like everything, every website, this website we're using right now is probably using Amazon Web Services to process the data handling in the back end. So everybody's paying a tax to that. Well, Amazon owns Anthropic, right? Which is Claude. Microsoft has shares in OpenAI, and Google owns Gemini, and Elon owns XAI, which has the Colossus computer. And every tool you use, when it's got those little sparkles in the corner that says AI something, right? Every single one of those sparkles is basically making an AI call to one of those 4 large language models, or going to the Chinese with DeepSeek or something. And so essentially every AI powered thing is paying a small penance of tax to one of those 4 platforms. And the rate at which Mo Godot just did this calculation, AI is doubling in its capacity every 5.9 months. And that's a rate of growth that the human brain can't comprehend. So by the time this happened, and happens and will happen, barring any innovation, which now AI could innovate itself, the fact that we're so hooked on what AI could do for us and you're not putting that back in the bottle, the concentration of wealth will be crazy. And the only thing that's potentially offering any respite is like that 62% of the economy is powered by consumption, not production. And so you will still need people to have money to consume, because otherwise 62% of the economy would disappear. But you're not going to put this back in the bottle. And if your home service business in 10 years isn't in some way associated to something that has the economies of scale built into it, I think you're in trouble. I think we're going to see some dystopian shit before we see some utopian shit. And everything about what I'm doing is retooling my entire vision for the company towards that, and trying to find the home service contractors that can understand the words that I'm saying and want to come on that ride.
That's huge. That I would recommend anybody who just listened to that to go back and listen to that bit again, because Adam just broke it down in a way that might have used some words that you didn't know. Look them up, pull out the dictionary, pull up to your favorite AI tool, because you just did a really good breakdown of condensing some of the stuff I've seen. Very, very interesting. The smart contracts and whatnot, hadn't thought of that, but that's exactly where it only makes sense to go that direction based on the tech we have now.
Yeah, technology exists. So we didn't have a need for an Ethereum smart contract, because we were all it's really doing is automating signing, you know what I mean? Enforcement of escrow, all this exists. But when a AI lawyer can write the contract between two people, and then you decide the asset that's being transferred and the consideration that's being offered can be independently evaluated using pre-designed metrics, and then an agreement can be made through the consultation of AI, and then all you now need is how do you get ChatGPT to send money to ChatGPT? There has to be an external digital thing, and the conventional banking system isn't really set up for that. And there's been this whole new banking system that's being built for it. There's a company called ARK Investments that wrote a really good paper on this, as the 2025 big ideas or something like that. And it showed it just visualized all the different little bits of infrastructure that have been being built over the last Bitcoin decade of decentralized finance and blockchain technology that has been mostly just watered down and diminished because of Jake Paul crypto coins and meme coins and Bitcoin millionaires and all the scammy shit that happens in a speculative crypto investment meme culture. But behind all of that has been this development of infrastructure that will power the medium of exchange of the future, not because it's the banks are evil, it's more no, it's an evolution from counting tablets on scales to eventually having gold as a unified medium exchange, to eventually a fractionally reserved banking system that, allows for digital transfer through a SWIFT banking system, to eventually the next thing. This is just the next evolution. It's not some way for us to eat the rich like a lot of crypto people talk about. That's not going to happen.
I'd like to say I designed this episode by starting with the human side of Adam, but I like that we set you up to show the human side before getting into this, because I think this scares a lot of people, and they're like, oh, Adam's just sold his soul to the machines.
Sold my soul to the the machine. It's a tool.
Exactly. And there's a very human side to all of this, and it's a tool. I've used the analogy of the skill saw. We were using your rocks to break down things and build houses, and then we got the hand saw, and that was incredible. And then we got the skill saw, and we could go so fast, and we could cut off our fingers way faster. And now we've got AI. It's another building tool. It's just another tool. CNC machines came in after skill saw. We're going to continue the analogy, but all of those were just tools, and you had to learn and adapt. CNC machines are awful confusing to someone who's just used a handsaw in their life before, but anybody can learn it. It's just different. It's not difficult necessarily. It's just different, and you got to wrap your head around it.
Well, and the nice thing is you get to borrow 50 IQ points from it to learn it, because it'll teach you.
It's true. What are you comfortable sharing on the direction that you guys are headed with Riven?
I'm open book, man. I'm very transparent. Yeah. So I guess the direction that we're going is we've been assembling a board of directors, and essentially the idea is that I look at the consolidation happening in the roofing market, and I know what private equity wants, because a couple of our customers have sold. A couple of our customers have bought other customers, like Royal Roofing bought Abernathy Roofing, or Equity Roofing bought Lanes Roofing. So I've seen the post-sale integration side. We work for a few private equity-backed roofing companies. So I see the consolidation happening in the industry, and I see there's these amorphous blobs just as absorbing circles and squares and triangles and trying to get them to take shape. And that's been really difficult. And private equity would love it if they try and do due diligence to understand, like, is this financial information true? But they don't understand the culture and the operations and the systems and the processes of roofing. And so then, they think, oh, well, we're just going to buy everybody and put them on Service Titan and that'll be good, or Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever. But the private equity firms don't know what they're doing. They spent literally, like, I know companies that spent $2 million post, roll up trying to get everybody on the same system, and they're not done. Like, they scrapped it and literally lit the money on fire and started fresh again with us, And so what we're doing is forming a special purpose vehicle to allow roofing companies to exit in a slightly innovative way, which is where we combine 20 million. It's like the private equity play, but different. We combined about $20 million in EBITDA, right? So net profit for simple terms. And we say, okay, all of our customers operate 85% the same way. So a CEO of one of our clients could go be the CEO of another one of our clients. That could happen. Where they're not unified is in things like their bookkeeping. So then there's the first layer of assistance that is beyond what RBP normally does. So RBP systems and processes, but then the accounting, right? We're going to take over the bookkeeping, accounting, workman's comp audits, payroll, state and local tax, all that, and unify the books and then taxes, and do exit consulting. So one of the board members brings an exit consulting firm to it. So we have an accounting firm, a tax firm, and a exit firm combined with a business consulting firm, which is RBP. And the five of us roll these companies up and essentially get them ready for sale. So we could get, say, 75% of the quality of earnings and the due diligence done. Now, in that, we take that and offer that to a strategic partner. So clients of ours say, hey, we've got a box of boxes that's the same size as your box. So no more blobs absorbing blobs, or blobs absorbing little circles and triangles and trying to make them into a blob. We've made you, right? Some of our private equity backed roofing companies have made you into a box, right? Like, we made you run just like these ones. So it's a box of boxes. Now, if they're not interested in buying, then we go to the second layer, which is where we have these two, highly respected consulting firms that everybody knows their names, and they are going to provide the higher level brand of stamp that says, like, no, this isn't a Kia, this is a Range Rover. It's a green Range Rover, but it's a Range Rover. And so our customers, which would be our partners in this SPV, these roofing businesses, if they take $2 million to the market right now, a broker is going to tell them 5x, and then he's going to talk them off the ledge at 2 to 3x multiples. So a $2 million company is going to get 4 to 6 million. And then, that's after their fees and their taxes and paying off partners and paying off debt, but that's what they're going to sell the roofing company for, roughly. Now, $20 million of EBITDA would go for like a 10x multiple. So you would get 200 million out of that. Now, that would be if it's a Range Rover. One company, 20 million, went through all the challenges of building a $20 million company. This is a box of boxes. So it's like Range Rover, but it's a green one. So they would maybe get like 7x. So now these roofing business owners that previously would have got 4 to 6 are now going to get 14. And the predictive validity behind that is that when private equity buys roofing companies, the problems that they face is not coming up with the money. Like, they have the money, and the problems that they face is that post-sale implementation. And so there's
everything that happens.
Yeah. So there's 3 layers to our essentially quality of earnings and due diligence, which is that what is the individual valuation of these companies? What is the value of them as a portfolio? And then based on the advising that we get from the exit consultant, what is the post-sale value? And all these owners are prepped for the post-sale experience. And because they're living and running like enterprise grade systems, warranties and guarantees and representations are all signed off on by big consulting firms that they know and trust, so that the transfer of liability is to the consulting firms and not them. So it's in exchange for that, we're taking a 20% fee on the transaction, but we're also putting up, the $895,000 to perform all of this
Do the
work externally and doing the work. So it's like, there's nearly $1 million in outside consultancy that comes in at a fractionalized basis, that the unit economics are better than if they went to hire each one of those firms themselves. So they're getting it for about half price. And those aren't hard numbers. It could be actually a little bit more. It's between 1 and 1.5. But, and then there's all the work and the time, right? That has to be done. And the best part is that there's an option where the roofing company doesn't even have to pay to get in. They can be scholarshiped in, or they can pay in, and then they get some investors side of it as well. And so our investment memorandum is just wrapping up finalization. So everything here is like, everything here is subject to change, but the general theories of it are true.
That's exciting. That's super exciting for you guys. And you bring, I mean, for those that don't follow you, they should be, whether you're in roofing or not, because it's, as we've discussed here, there's some very high level thinking that goes on between your ears, and it's exciting to kind of see the trickle down effect on the roofing industry and, the different industries that this will touch. And, I'm in marketing, but I just find it fascinating chatting and listening to you. But where can people best follow what you are doing?
The best thing is, I would say level one is just like add us on Facebook. That's probably where I'm the most human. LinkedIn would be second. And then really joining our webinars, there's a great way to just communicate with me. So it's not necessarily following, it's more like communicating. And the exciting new thing that I've done is I've uploaded every hour of our webinars, every blog, every podcast interview, even this interview, I'll eventually scrape the audio, which pulls my voice out of it. Everything that I've ever said basically in a public setting online has been put into this like 4.9 million word RAG vectorized database, and you can communicate to it through chat, through phone call, and through texting, I believe. Yeah, if you opt in. And so you can ask it questions, and it's done a speech analysis on me. It knows that I say right and okay way too much. It's uncanny how templatized it could make my speech style. And I update it every single day because it just now live feeds through automation to update this brain basically. And you can chat with it on there. And while I can't keep up to all the messages that are in there, I find that it makes conversations like this get to that deeper level faster because people feel like they get to ask the basic questions and then they get to come to me for like the level 2 deeper and the human context part.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I chatted with it when it first came out, and then obviously, a little bit more prepping for this. Very cool. So we'll link to all of that in the blog and the podcast and everything for people. One last thing I'd like to touch on, and I think we'll probably have to do a round 2 because there's a lot of I loved it.
I love stuff like this. It takes the conversation in interesting directions. I love stuff like this. I'm happy to do a round 2 with you.
Cool. We'll put it on the schedule. But just before we go here, what content creation that is big for you guys? I mean, we went through the webinar side of it. You had noted that as something to chat about. I'd like to, obviously we can't go into the whole thing, but tools and whatnot that you're using to scale content production, that's a personal interest of mine, and I think important for business owners in any industry to figure out.
I think that there's 2 kind of categories of like volume and quality. So it is so easy to create stuff at volume, and then you have to make data-driven decisions. So like everybody who's opened up Instagram, if your algorithm's anything like mine, you probably see this like countries as bears, countries as warranties, countries as transformers, right? So like, or like a guy trying to see how many sticks of spaghetti can hold me up, and then how many rolls of duct tape can hold me up, and how many Safeway or like plastic bags. So what happened is people generate ideas at a high rate and then look for small signals, right? Those whispers to find out what works. And then they lean super hard into high volume what that is. And home service contractors, you have to think like, what is the stuff that works at volume in terms of like these faceless AI produced videos? What just gets attention and gets your views algorithm up? You can post 100 times a day on TikTok. Mr. Beast just did a thing on that. And it was like, so you can test content at such a rapid pace to collect data to find market message fit. The second side of that is quality. And those things are more timeless, which is like being as close to the authentic you as possible while not being an asshole, and putting out people, product, process, thought reversal, giving pledge, and caught doing it right videos, and just getting over being afraid of being on camera. Like it just does not matter. It doesn't matter what the roofer haters say, because the window of that opportunity is also closing. And I think that, social media is old enough that we take it for granted, but also old enough that it is now a blockbuster like thing that is capable of being disrupted because the experience is not perfect. I mean, it was already disrupted once by TikTok when they went from follower-based feed to like an algorithmic interest-based feed where now people you don't know show up on your For You page or your your homepage, whereas like Facebook is still very much in the, who am I following? Or YouTube is like, who am I following? TikTok disrupted social media with the like, what do you like? Let me show you more things that you like, because then you will stay on the platform longer. So what is the next round of that? And how does that impact your content creation, right? These are things that are worth pondering and worth seeking counsel. And so to any home service contractors in the room, I would say that, recognize who you are and what you do. What you are is you sell, build, and collect. That's what you do. You sell, build, and collect. So opportunity acquisition, finance, building your systems, like all of those things are vendor agreements. Stay within the four corners of you being a business owner, which is innovative campaigns, systems and processes, leadership development, and business development. And that business development is knowing the right vendors to work with and people who are going to be wise counsel, who are going to, on a fractionalized basis, give you access to way more smarter payroll than what you could possibly put in-house, because you don't manufacture your shingles. If we're talking to roofers, you don't build your roofs, right? You don't, like, why is it a stretch to think that you should also have really great vendor relationships with trusted partners for things like customer acquisition, systems building, logistics, that kind of stuff.
Huge. Well, a segue to the next one. I want to respect your time here, Adam. This has been really fun. And like I always say, guys, there were nuggets in here, and you need to go back and pick a few of them, whether it be, learning a little bit more about AI in the future, whether it be, figuring out how to track your baby's diapers. There's things that were important in here that were discussed. And I just want to thank you, Adam, for coming on. Appreciate everyone who's tuned in. Go out there, take action, color outside the lines, and make some moves in your market. And we will see you for round 2 when we bring Adam back on. For round 2.
Yep.